Joining me now on the Daily Ledger Page 5 beat from Nashville, Tennessee, hedge fund manager, behavioral economist, and columnist for Forbes, Thomas Landstreet. Tom, this is completely counterintuitive to me and counterproductive if you're a hedge fund manager. It seems like, to me, you are a hedge fund manager. Can you explain to me what these people are thinking when they embrace an anti-free market scheme like global warming?
Well, Graham, I would not invest with these funds, and I would admonish anyone against it because they're advocates, not investors, first off. And the knee-jerk reaction to this basically prevents us from doing something that's logical and measured. It's probably not a bad idea to reduce our carbon emissions. Okay, there's no absolute guarantee that we are warming, by the way, but I doubt that lowering our carbon emissions is a bad thing, but you can be judicious about it. By the way, most of these people are probably state government pension plans.
Yeah.
So there are probably fewer private investors involved here. But again, I certainly wouldn't invest with them because they're advocates, not investors.
I think that's a good call there. And last I checked, I think it was in 5th grade, I learned that CO2 is a necessary component for us to live on this planet, that actually plants take in the CO2, from what I remember, and they emit oxygen, which is kind of what we need on this planet too. So, I mean, all this stuff needs to be challenged. And like you said, woe is you if you give a dime to these people. But Goldman Sachs is reputable. And they're out with a couple of statements today. Number one, they think the Federal Reserve, I don't know what tea leaves they're reading, but they think the Federal Reserve is going to back off. Maybe they've been watching the machinations of the stock markets. I don't know. But number one, they think that the Fed's going to back off. And number two, they've said what I've been saying, I think you've been saying, and many other people have been saying, that there is no recession on the horizon.
Well, you're absolutely right about that, and hats off to Goldman Sachs. But the truth is they had 4 raises baked into their expectations for next year. Now they still have 3. I'll tell you right now, there will be none. So I'm going to step out right now, Graham, and tell you, 1, there's no inflation. 2, the stresses we're seeing in the equity markets and the stock markets right now is not related to necessarily a slowdown or a recession. It's 100% related to the Fed, and they have been tightening too quickly. It's called quantitative tightening. It's not just interest rates, Graham. They're also reducing the size of the Fed's balance sheet. Remember, we went over this before, 60% of NASDAQ components have junk bond rated debt. By the way, much of it floating rate debt at over 8% interest. A modest increase in short-term rates will stress the heck out of those companies. And not only that, but our own treasuries. Remember, we went over the fact that we have $11 trillion they got to refinance in the next 5 years, $3.5 trillion next year. The Fed is ahead of itself. They do need to pause. I'm not sure they're going to do the December rate increase, Graham. I really am not sure about that. And then if they do, it's because they're worried about the knock-on effects of not doing it. But they won't do another one, perhaps in the entire year of 2019.
Well, the housing market is clearly being affected by it. We're seeing, I wouldn't call it a slowdown per se, but it seems as though inventories are going up a little bit, and houses are staying on the market maybe a little bit longer, and so that's a function certainly of interest rates. But as you pointed out, there's really no sign of inflation here. And when you look at the indicators, it's not just inflation, but there are other indicators. Sure, we saw the long bond and the short bond intersect last week. But that's only one of many indicators of whether there's a recession coming. And I think that, despite what's going on with the market's red glare right now, that I would agree with Goldman Sachs. I don't see any sign of a recession on the horizon. Tom, thanks.
Want to see more videos like this? Click on the link below and subscribe to One American News on YouTube. And call your cable provider and kindly demand that One American News is added to your lineup. Call and subscribe today.